Welcome, Michael. How are you today?
Very well, thank you, Brad. How are you?
I am good. We were just talking offline about the various lockdowns around the world, and I'm going to do everything in my consciousness to avoid getting sucked into another conversation on it. So, welcome back to the lockdown sessions. It's been a couple of months since we sat down and did one of these, so I'm interested in some of your observations in recent months, and maybe even on yourself rather than just other people, because I always think that's more exciting. Of how you've been adapting to the world that we're living in right now. You work for yourself, you work at home. So some of the things that you've been observing and maybe that have been highlighted to you in recent months. Maybe we could start there and see what happens with the conversation.
That sounds great. The first thing that came to my mind was curating my feed. So, starting to identify information that is, I can't find the right word, is useful to me, is important to me, and filtering out information that doesn't really do anything for me. So,
Example?
Example. I want to keep this broad because I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. But let's just say updates on a certain political election upcoming.
Yes.
Of which I have very little ability to impact or influence. So why even go down the rabbit hole of finding things that to disagree with when I could be finding as much more inspirational or updation that I could be consuming.
Of course, you're not talking about the New Zealand general election that since just one. And it is a rabbit hole, but you've hit on a real hot potato for me, because in my house we now flip between CNN and Fox News because CNN just despise the incumbent in the US of A. It is. I think it's an interesting one, though. When you talk about curating, because there's somebody who very carefully considers, I think, every action and then dismisses the impact it might have. So when we're trying to put things out on feeds, I know for me, I'm thinking of the widest audience and how can I tap into the people who follow and maybe get others interested so that they would want to follow. And it's done on a micro level compared to 300 million people in a country, clearly. But I am intrigued by the notion that if you just talk to your base, let's use political language, it becomes an echo chamber. And I saw a really interesting post on LinkedIn yesterday, I think, where someone had done some research into why 70% of people on LinkedIn don't post anything. It's a voyeuristic chamber. And a lot of people are nervous that, they don't want to in any way get the wrath of their company because they make some statement that is not correct with regards to company standing on things. I've had somebody do a podcast who's very gently, emailed me afterwards and said, "Could you take down the hashtag of the company name, please? Because we don't reference our company at all in any forms of media, especially not on YouTube." And there's a real sensitivity because I think, when you look at things like social media and LinkedIn, I don't use Twitter really anymore. It is, if you just talk to your followers, then it's just an echo chamber of people telling you, yeah, amazing point, well done. And yet, aren't we trying to create engagement? Do we just want people to give us 150 likes and 43 comments that say, that's amazing. Oh, you're a genius for coming up with that. Because the innovation and creative ideas, that there aren't actually that many. A lot of this, I mean, if I read, I saw a post this morning, a webinar on running effective virtual meetings. Now, I thought we'd finished that 6 months ago. 2 months into lockdown, I was already a little bit tired of, and I posted infographics myself, by the way, on how to run an effective virtual meeting. But I thought we'd moved on from that. But no, there's still, and there's people writing, that was amazing. So are people not reading anything? Are we just living in the echo chamber of our own followers? Because it doesn't that just create ultimately like just a narcissistic population of people who are seeking validation, and I'm really uncomfortable if that's who I've become.
I think the key word you hit on there was engagement, because that's what I try to do on LinkedIn. So I'm on Twitter, but I use Twitter differently. I use Twitter to find interesting people and content. But LinkedIn is more about trying to engage people that I've had connection with. So first of all, my connections on LinkedIn are only people I've ever worked with or done some form of training with. I really don't connect with people I don't know until we've had an opportunity to work together in some capacity. So my connection count's quite low, intentionally. And then now what I'm trying to develop is how to create content that engages people. Because like you say, I think, well, I heard about it once of like thinking about LinkedIn as like a 24-hour global networking event. And that kind of got me to thinking about like, how would you act at a physical networking event? And, you know, the idea of sending a connection request to somebody with no information about you, who you are, just one looking up to you, not saying anything, and shut their business in your face and walking away. And so when I started thinking about, well, what would you do at a networking event? You know, start some light conversation, try and find some common ground, a topic to talk about, start unpacking it a little. Maybe you've been to good events where you've met someone really interesting and you've had a really good, thorough conversation. So you know, how could we create content that's a bit more like that? That's the challenge for me.
That requires you to read everybody's post in detail and come up with something then to connect on.
When you say everybody, though, what do you mean by everybody?
Yeah, you're right. I don't mean everybody. I mean, how do you filter? The question actually is, how do you filter through the feed to know what to want to engage on?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are some people who are sitting there, Michael, I'm absolutely convinced they do no work all day. I mean, there are some people who are posting on LinkedIn like 4, 5, 6 times a day. It's like, do some bloody work, mate.
Yeah.
Come on.
If I have something that, and again, it's to me, is this annoying me? If this is annoying me, then it's just a simple action of unfollow, get it out of my feed.
Right.
And I started to think about it more. So my feed is a combination of connections and people I follow.
Yeah.
And I've started to think about it more as like just a continuous cycle of grooming. You know, some people will be of value to me for some period of time, and then I'll change, they'll change. I don't need them in my feed anymore. So just consciously being like, okay, I've seen this person pop up several times. I'm not getting value from their content. I'll unfollow them. And, you know, they go their way, I'll go my way. But at the same time, looking for other people to connect with. You know, who else could I be following? What's something new I could be looking at?
There are groups now on LinkedIn. I've even been invited to join them. I've rejected the desire to, where you all like each other's posts as quickly as possible so that you get the traction to sort of start trending. and I'm like, that doesn't feel as organic as I would want it to. I want to put something out there, and whenever I'm nervous of putting something out there, it's normally absolutely the moment to put it out there, because it means it will probably speak to other people. And when
Mhm.
I've perfectly crafted something or spent more time on it, it's like, well, actually, that's just been crafted almost too much. I don't
Mhm.
want the perfect post. I want to post what's just really in my mind today or this week. And I'm always fascinated at what gets watched or what gets read or viewed or engaged with, because it goes back to this engagement bit, right? It's it's great to have lots of followers today. That's kind of how the world is made up. But unless you're engaging with them, it's just a
Mhm.
number that probably validates people that they're cool.
Yeah, you've stumbled on a number of good topics there. So yeah, what do they call it? Engagement pods. So groups of people
Mm.
that quickly like each other's posts, so it it appears in more feeds. To me, that falls under the category of growth hacking, which I don't feel like is a sustainable model. Like at some point, LinkedIn's going to change the algorithm, and that's not going to work anymore. And then you haven't really developed the real skill of engagement. So then you've just got to go and find another hack that you can use to substitute for the one that was working. Um, and you talked again about followers, and I think as I've been talking about engagement, I've been mindful of what we talked about briefly before we came on air, which was, as a small business owner working by myself, I've discovered that I really miss the connection of teams and other people, and I think that's why I've been focusing on, like, how do I get LinkedIn to be maybe some sort of extension of that for the moment. Physical events aren't really a thing right now, but the need for networking with others hasn't gone away. So how can I turn to LinkedIn and maybe create something that can kind of scratch that itch?
And have you considered? I know some colleagues of mine do this and do it very successfully, creating your own group that then drives the right kind of people to engage on the right kind of topics.
It's a good point. I've heard of groups and I've looked at a couple of groups, but I haven't really gone down that path yet. But yeah, I mean, something to consider perhaps.
I know two colleagues and friends of mine set up a group on Facebook originally, and they've grown it to around 700 people, coaches,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm part of the group, and the group doesn't necessarily feed me with lots, but some
Mm-hmm.
interesting posts pop up there from time to time that I contribute on. It's a lot of new coaches joining, so newly qualified coaches, often seeking advice or guidance. And I don't feel the need to offer when there's lots of other relatively new coaches who have been through that experience much more recently and can
Mm-hmm.
comment. Um, I've, been around for long enough now to probably not have the experience that those people need. But I find it interesting that they've got a constant flow of people, and it's not just them pushing stuff out, it's other people contributing. And so it goes to this, the word I like that you used was, curating your feed. And that suggests, crafting it, spending time thinking about it, creating an order to it. That takes effort. No?
Yes. Yeah, but not as much as you think. Not as much as you think. So something that I've had to teach myself not to do is to drop into LinkedIn multiple times a day. So I normally choose a period that's kind of at the end of the working day, before dinner time, where I can go in for. It depends on what's happening. It might be a short period of time. It might be maybe 30 minutes or something like that. But just take that opportunity to go through the feed, look at the notifications, add relevant comments, and yeah, just unfollow anything that's not helpful. The following sides, that's where I find the effort at the moment. So
Mm.
I found things that other people have created. There was this copywriter guy who did this interesting thing, and in the process of doing it, he kind of got other people to provide their insight, and then he listed all those people that provided insight. And so I've gone back through that document, and I'm looking at every single one of those person's profile and on the internet, what they're about, and trying to find, people that I might be interested in learning more from. And so from the mass number that he has, which is like 600 or something, yeah, I mean, for me, only a few people kind of pop out of that process.
Yeah.
So that takes quite a bit of time to sift through, with only like a few people kind of appearing at the end of it. But how will I know if that's worthwhile if I don't try it?
Yeah, I like the effort. I mean, I don't just like the effort. I kind of bow to that because it requires a real sort of patience to go through, and also a care to be open to what others can share. I think I'm a little bit more lazy when it comes to how I follow on LinkedIn. If somebody says something that just for some reason has appeared in my feed through maybe someone else's being tagged in it, and I find it stimulating, I'll follow. And as soon as they sort of, put too much out there and swamp LinkedIn, I'm out of there because that's just too much. And I'm I'm the kind of LinkedIn user that checks my notifications every couple of days, and have a regular alarm on a Thursday that pops up on my mobile that reminds me to post something or think about posting something. So now we have the podcast, so it's easy to do. But then as I was reflecting last week, it's like, well, if the last 6 weeks have been kind of just lazy posting because it's just the podcast going out, you've got to do something different. And actually, I can't remember if we talked about this when we were working together a year or so ago, but I remember a couple of years ago, Michael, I spent days curating a post on emotional intelligence and how it was, a vital skill and quality, which, by the way, I still believe it is. And I got like 400 views. I was quite pleased at the time. And then about 18 months ago, I posted a picture from the place where you and I first met, a graduation ceremony of a leadership program. I posted a picture of 4 empty chairs. I hashtagged it judges table. 8,000 views. At this moment, I realized that the effort required to hashtag a picture was far more offering a return on investment than the 4 days I spent over the weekend writing this post. But what it leads me to believe, and so I check now with someone who spends their world in copy, are we not creating maybe in LinkedIn the Instagram of the corporate social media world? Because I already feel like it's a little bit leaning into Facebook of the corporate world now. There's lots of sad stories coming out on LinkedIn, which, by the way, are totally inspirational, but I don't know if I want to read in my LinkedIn feed. I'm going to say that. Or so many of them. There's people, sending out pictures of them, at awards ceremony, which is great, but I don't need to see the picture of them at the drinks before the awards ceremony. It feels, maybe I'm sounding really militant and old. I'm just wondering, is it meant to become the Facebook of the social media world for corporates? Because ultimately the next step is to become Instagram, where it will just be pictures of ourselves hashtagging mindfulness. As I'm looking at my office building on a sunny morning. I don't know. Maybe I'm sounding overtly militant, and I'll edit that bit out the podcast.
I think it will become what we collectively allow it to become.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about your view post before, there's a lot of different ways you could dissect that. One way would be to look at, what was your why for your when you did your emotional intelligence post. What was your why behind doing that? So clearly, if your why was, I just want to see what content I can put on quickly to get the most number of views, then you've learned something that thoughtful content doesn't achieve that purpose. But if your why was something more about, this is just something I really want to write, and I really want to take the time to think about it and craft it over a couple of days, then it's delivered something for you that you've been able to share with others. And another way to dissect it could be to look at, if you only had 400 views on the emotional intelligence post, but you had 8,000 views on the chair table, which group of people do you want to meet up with?
Well, and based on my lack of social desire at times, probably the first one, right? The one with 8,000 views. Who knows who would want to like? The fact that people like it is like, it's almost ironic.
Maybe that could become your niche.
Right.
If my feed starts having posts from you, Brad, of empty chairs around tables and other places, I tell you, I'm cutting you so fast.
I'm going to try it, but as an experiment, right? A completely unscientific one. Maybe it also highlights, Michael, and I take your point. The crafted emotional intelligence is a passion, an interest, a deep interest of mine. And I wasn't putting it out there for likes. I've never been someone who puts things out for likes. It's not my motivation. I put things out there to create, as part of the brand of training and coaching that we do, an authentic, seamless approach to every time you hear, see, or read anything. That message is always the same. The post that was put out on LinkedIn of empty chairs at empty tables was taken, at 8:30 in the morning in a hotel in Singapore before the room, got covered with people and the day started. And it was an Instagram moment.
Mm-hmm.
It was an Instagram moment, but I put it on LinkedIn because it was a work-based thing.
You just fulfilled your own prophecy of not
it's become Instagram. It's become Instagram. And that's why it gets so many likes. Because on my private Instagram feed, which is only for friends and family, it's the same people that like it anyway. It's my own little echo chamber. I post pictures of the kids and the pets. That's it. So empty chairs at empty tables, and the same people will like it.
And I think you missed a great opportunity there to have the caption, "People are our greatest asset."
Next time, mental note to self. Talk to me a little bit then about, as you mentioned before, if LinkedIn was like a 24-hour networking event, how would we behave? As someone who never enjoyed networking events, that kind of rush to connect with people, how do you leverage from a content and a copy point of view? So you put a really interesting post out last week, inviting coaches to share lessons learned. What made you come up with that?
I copied it. Yeah.
I love the
honesty. Now, I mentioned this before. I saw somebody else do a similar thing in the copywriting space. And I've actually written a post on how he did it, which I shared to my list of subscribers. And I will post that on LinkedIn in November. It kind of unpacks the method. But I thought, why don't I try it and see what happens? I probably won't get the same results as he got, because he's spent more time delivering valuable content in the network, he has more followers, et cetera, et cetera. But I felt like I could try it. I might see some results. And I think when I started to dissect it, it was about and I think when he started it, he didn't even see his own genius in this. But essentially what it did was he gave people a good reason to comment, which was, I'm going to leave a tip every day. I'd like you to also leave your tip every day. I'm going to go through them all at the end of this series. He did 9 days worth. I'm going to go through the end of the series. I'm going to find out the best ones. I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to link to your LinkedIn profile or your website so that other people can find. So he's creating a big asset that allows other people to find these people. So it can be used as a networking tool. So I looked at that model and thought, could something similar be applied to coaching? And I decided to make it a little bit different. So 1 post every week for 4 weeks. And then the idea of inviting specific people to comment, but also encouraging them to invite people they know to comment to try and get a bit of a network effect. And then again, at the end, collating this information, going back and sharing out the links to the various people that contributed. And to me, this is when it starts to switch, because it becomes less about me and followers and my content and my point of view, and more about the group of people I'm engaging with and how they think, and helping to help others connect with them.
I like that one. I love the more philanthropic feel about it. It's about others and not me. And also it's slightly different. It's a nuanced difference from what I'm also observing on LinkedIn, which is clearly there have been a number of webinars about how to engage on LinkedIn. So you make a post and then you pose a question at the bottom. And this is what apparently will then, get people to comment. But that's a bit like lazy journalism. I think, here's my thoughts, 5 paragraphs on it. What do you think? tell me your story.
Agree? Question mark.
And I'm not 100% convinced that the people writing those genuinely care what others are saying. They're just trying to create engagement. I was sharing with someone the other day, frightening post I read, and I'm not often compelled to be overtly challenging on LinkedIn unless something really moves me. And there was a career coach, a well-tenured career coach, we'll say, who posted about 6 weeks ago, if you're at risk of losing your job during COVID, you have to get into the office and get FaceTime with your manager, or you'll be the first to go. I just thought, this guy is scaring people. This is a career coach. Surely we've moved beyond the world of 1980s management where I need FaceTime with my boss to keep my job. I mean, let alone the fact that we're living during a pandemic, and honestly, the psychological safety required for some people to go back into the office needs to be catered for before you force them through the door to keep their jobs. I mean, that just sounds like a tribunal waiting to happen. Well, I got a little uppity, Michael. And I started to kind of write this response, and I realized the response was quite long, and I'm starting to curate it. I'm going back and I'm editing. Like with your post last week, I thought, oh my God, I know my first lesson. It's not about you, it's all about them. And there I was with my list of questions, ticking them off. Honestly, I'd give him a whole free set of sessions again if I could see him again, just to apologize for how rubbish my sessions were back then. But this guy was right. And then he responded to me because I called him out on his thing, and he started to get defensive and then change his stance. And I started to read through, and I realized the guy had about 1,300 comments. So then I thought, he's just being divisive to get engagement. So I asked him, I said, can I check? Are you just doing this to wind people up? Are you like one of those shock jocks on talkback radio that, opens the half-hour segment with a real contentious point, and then everybody starts dialing in to want to talk to you? No, he wasn't. He wasn't. He stood by his point. He genuinely believes that people needed FaceTime. And I just said to him, I wondered who he was working with. Like, what clients was he working with that felt? I mean, imagine if you were told you had to go into the office, otherwise you might lose your job. What on earth would you think?
I don't think I can begin to answer that question.
Right? And he was putting this out there. Now, this was a guy with 30 plus years experience. 30 plus years. Imagine the people that individual is coaching, and the scaring that those people will be going. I mean, it's actually just wrong. So there's, and I suppose the reason why I'm elaborating on that story is, when you talk about curating, I also think, curating is a, how am I responding to what's coming in to my feed? So what do I want to see and what do I want to respond to? I also think there's a responsibility when you're posting to the people who are following or listening or watching or might see it, to really consider what it is you're putting out there, because of the influence it has. And I'm not suggesting you and I are somehow these great social media influencers. I'm not suggesting that. But whether you've got one person following you or 100,000 people following you, words have meaning, and they have power, and they have weight. And I'm preaching to the converted. You know all about the power of words, and maybe this is like a full circle back to your original point about an upcoming election on November the 3rd. The weight of words has power, and I wonder if people take that perhaps as seriously as they could or should when they are posting on LinkedIn. I don't know. Maybe it's a bit philosophical.
To me, it ties back into the why. What is it you're trying to achieve by posting this thing? Is it you're trying to achieve radical engagement by putting in a very different point of view on something? Okay, well, maybe you achieve that. But the way you speak, Brad, speaks more about that. That being authentic, your own personal brand. When I post something, how can I just check myself? Is this authentic to who I am? Is this upholding the brand, my personal brand? Bit of a term I don't really want to use right now, but who I want to be, how I want to be showing up for other people.
For me, that's really important. I don't mind using the phrase. I think of it as my signature more than my brand.
Mm-hmm.
The signature for me is, whenever I write my signature, it sometimes looks a little different, right? It's not always the same. I mean, it looks the same if you put 20 of them out, but if you really were to investigate and check it, there would be probably areas where there were just slight differences, and there would be nuances in how I shape the B or the R or the A or the. And so for me, it's signature, but I've always felt, to create that authenticity, it's about the words and actions being aligned. People know when you're not. So if you and I meet in a workshop or in a coaching session or online or on a Zoom call or on a webinar or on LinkedIn, I want your interaction with me to always feel the same. So what I'm saying, I can't be putting stuff on LinkedIn and not be talking about it in my workshops, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to just put stuff on LinkedIn that lands really well in my workshops, because then I'm just creating that echo chamber that I don't want to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not that savvy with social media, so I'm not pretending to know how to do it. But I've only found, for me, we work with coaching you and I work on a program specifically where we look to help people raise their visibility as leaders. And one of the ways people do that is by starting to show up more on LinkedIn. And so we're inviting people to start considering, how can you show up more visibly and show yourself as a leader? I wonder, are there tips, as someone who's refined how they curate and how they post, and words are a skill for you, are there tips in how to approach raising visibility in an authentic way to promote oneself and one's ideas?
I think, like you, Brad, on the scale of social media experts and influencers, I'm nowhere near the top of that scale. And I think anything I've learned about it has just been through brute force, trial and error,
Right, yeah.
Over a long period of time, and just observing others and considering things and trying things. So again, we keep coming back to the why. Why are you doing it? What's the purpose behind what you're doing? Because there's multiple ways to look at it. Perhaps, if you talk about people wanting to step up their influence, perhaps they're just trying to find what it is that resonates with people. So if I start putting out some topics of interest to me, I might be able to start to tell from the engagement and the likes which topics other people are also interested in, and then I can maybe focus more on those topics. That could be one way to do it. For other people, it could just be about gaining confidence. Again, if we think back to physical networking, some people are more natural at walking up to others and introducing themselves, and other people, are there to kind of. I've worked with students before, mentoring, and some of them going to networking events was literally their goal was, I'm just going to walk up to one person and introduce myself. And I was like, that sounds like a great goal to get started with. Absolutely. So yeah, for some people it could be a bit more like that. Maybe I could just post something on LinkedIn to see what happens. Because I imagine for some people it's crazy scary. Like, I'm going to write something, I'm going to put it out there, and perhaps it's not going to be well received, or I'm going to get some negative comments, and I really don't want that.
I think it goes back to your point earlier where you're referencing it's about the why. It's a why you're doing it, and if there's an authenticity attached to that why, then I don't think it matters what you put. It's how I feel about these podcasts. Whether there's 70 people, 300 people, or 3,000 people, actually, for me, I really enjoy the conversations with the people. I just love it. I can't believe we're approaching like the 50th episode soon, right? And I just love having conversations with people. I really enjoy them. Like, it's 30 to 45 minutes with interesting people. And if it creates engagement, actually, that's totally secondary. Totally secondary. I put them on LinkedIn actually because we put them on the CTG page on LinkedIn, and they automatically then go onto my feed. I absolutely loved. I find myself setting up, 2 or 3 a week, where I can genuinely look forward to conversations with people about topics that are interesting. I mean, how much fun is that?
I love that word fun. I've come back to that from time to time where something's not working and I'm like, what's wrong here? I'm not having fun. Well, how do I make this more fun then? We talked about this some time ago, Brad. You were interested in, I think, blog posting or creating something, and you couldn't kind of get it started. And I think one of the questions at the time I asked you was like, how do you make your content an output of something you're already doing? And I've actually written about what you do here with the lockdown sessions, because you've managed to do it. You've managed to take something that you were just interested in doing, which is, I want to talk to people about their experience in lockdown. I'm inviting them to a Zoom call. I'm just going to hit the record button and publish it. So you've turned something you wanted to do into like a machine that creates this output of content that's now attached to your business and yourself. So it's developing a personal brand because now people can see you in action, what you're about. They're hearing a consistent message. They're getting to see the caliber of the people that you're involved with. And the one thing that blows my mind, and I haven't been able to ask you yet, is what the heck have you learned from talking to all these people?
I love how you've thrown a question back at me. I think that's great. What a brilliant question. Do you know, actually, it's so long, I might write a book about it, except I don't want to write a book. Actually, I've learned a number of things personally and professionally. And actually too many to just like list off. It would sound almost disingenuous. The most important thing I learned during the real meat of the lockdown time, I noticed one day, I've moved my office around in the last couple of months. As we move into kind of autumn and then winter here, I wanted a different feel in the office. But during the spring and summer, my desk was by my window. And I was looking out one day, sort of, not even talking to people, just thinking out loud to myself, as I often do. And I observed all the plants growing, and I'd never really noticed them before. Like the period of time where they start to really grow and bloom. And I thought apart from looking pretty, I thought, how nice to have the time to see that. And it kind of reminded me of the mindfulness approach that I might take on a dog walk, where I'll stop and I'll sit under a tree and I'll enjoy and savor the moment of sitting under a tree with my dogs. So actually, I don't want to forget this moment where I enjoyed looking out my window and seeing plants growing. The world slowed down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something I really savored and have tried to make sure, and have invited friends to remind me when I get a little bit too caught up in myself and work, that I said that I wasn't going to let myself be just caught up in work. I was going to stop and smell the roses, literally, physically smell the roses. So that's definitely a lesson. I think another observation is that people talked about resilience when this all kicked off and how we'd all need resilience. And I'm coming to the opinion that my actual observation is that resilience is great to bounce back from adversity. But I think what we need right now is endurance. And as a long distance runner and someone who's been involved in ultra marathons in my time, that's not about resilience. You need resilience in an ultra marathon when at 42 kilometers, you've still got 58 kilometers to go and you're tired. You need to get up off the floor and keep moving forward. And that's resilience in that moment. But what gets you to the end of the 100K is endurance, the ability to endure for a sustained period of time and an uncertain path what might happen. And embrace it. And so I've learned for myself that actually I'm very comfortable with uncertainty. And the fact that life is volatile and uncertain doesn't bother me. I actually get a bit of a kick of it out of it. So I can thrive in uncertain times. So those are the personal and professional learnings. The personal, stop and smell the roses, and don't ever forget that you enjoyed a moment where you just stared out of your window and watched the plants growing and started to observe it every day, how they were getting bigger or changing color. And on a professional level, actually recognizing a skill or a strength and shifting from thinking it was resilient, oh yes, I'm resilient, to actually this is about endurance, and I know why I'm good at it, because of my long distance running. It was like a metaphor of an ultra marathon. And I honestly, Michael, I have I have been in 100-kilometer races where, I've got to 92K and my body is broken, and like having 8K left means still an hour to go. And I'm looking at the bottom of a hill thinking, really? Really? You're going to make me go up a hill at this point? And it's endurance is the need for constant resilience in so many moments. And so those would be the two like real crystallized learnings. I don't know if they resonate with you at all. Thank you for asking that question. No one's asked me in 5 months that question.
Oh, it's, yeah, to me, when I just looked at it, I thought everyone who appears on your podcast has a moment with you individually. So this is our second session. I'm hugely grateful for it because I love spending time with you and speaking with you. But it then occurred to me, well, you've got this experience across a spectrum of people. So that's adding like another layer of like seeing something that, like when I speak with you, I get something out of it, but you're getting that like at a multiple level because you're seeing something across people and you're picking up threads across this series. I love that idea of endurance. I never really thought about it. But you're right. I think that's kind of when we, the uncertainty of how things are going to play out over the next couple of years, and when will things get more back to normal or less back to normal, whatever that means. And endurance feels like a really appropriate word. Is, well, we've just got to keep going.
Right. Yeah. It's not actually a debate because we do. An ex-colleague of yours and someone I was on the podcast with a few weeks ago, Kenny, I thought told a beautiful story where he shared how someone had been saying to him about we're all in the same boat right now. And Kenny's way of looking at it, which was a beautiful reframe for me, was no, we're not. We're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm. We're all in different boats. And some of us are in, 100-foot yachts and sun cruisers and sun seekers. Some of us are in inflatable dinghies and wooden canoes that are leaking. So there is a level of empathy globally with, the challenges, but actually we're all in different boats. And I think that's what I've loved about doing the podcast is I've got to sit in different boats every week and go on a little journey with someone. Although if we come out of lockdown, I'll have to change the title. So I'll probably have to go to, there's a post on LinkedIn to drive engagement. What shall we call the coming out of lockdown sessions? Just, maybe in brackets.
The smackdown sessions where
Right,
Brad gives it to you real.
Yeah, exactly. I thought of the recovery sessions, but I thought that might limit the people who would listen to it. Because there's something kind of innately attached to recovery, which maybe we're not really doing. It's not about recovery. So I need to come up with something there. But you know what I think is the best bit is we did talk a couple of years ago about how could I create some kind of output, and it wasn't going to be writing. I tried it. It wasn't going to be the book. I tried it. Actually, this is the beauty of the digital legacy. I can just have a chat and copy and paste and edit and insert intros and outros, and there's some really cool content. And I'll tell you what else is a lovely aside is, especially when working with coaches who I work with, so for example with you, it allows me, and I've enjoyed this, to shine a light on other people's ideas. And that's been quite good fun. So, from a business point of view, I can actually direct clients to a website now and say, hey, listen, go and check out Michael if you're thinking of using him as a coach. Actually watch him talk about it for half an hour. You can get a real flavor of him. We had a client come to us and ask us for, a mindfulness workshop, specifically asking for Laura because they watched her podcast on mindfulness. Yeah. How cool is that?
Yeah, that's so cool. It's so cool. And that to me is where it's at. It's not the views and the likes.
No,
That's the heart and the soul of it.
right.
And when you abstract this even further, I'm into abstraction at the moment, but when you abstract this even further, if you think of your life, sometimes I think of my life as just simply a collection of experiences.
Mm.
And so what you're creating here is an experience that you'll have with you for the rest of your life, this time when you did this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, it's not even about how long. I feel quite comfortable that I will trust the moment when it stops and something else
Mm-hmm.
starts.
Yeah.
And I don't believe I've ever proactively gone onto my BuzzFeed or Buzzsprout, whatever it's called, and checked numbers. I do get sent data sheets from the people who do all the PR and are interested in doing that for us, and I do get to see it. But I'm not even sure I look every week, because what I care about is who I'm speaking to. Like this week, I've got to speak to you. Last week I spoke to the HR director of the Times Educational Supplement, a woman I've worked with for over 20 years. Absolutely loved that conversation. And later on this week, Michael, I'm talking to a woman who sailed across the Atlantic on her own. I mean, talk about resilience and endurance there. I can't wait
Oh
for that.
yeah. Oh, I'll look forward to that one. I'll look forward to that one.
Yeah, just great. So I think it's those moments where how nice to be able to record interesting conversations and create
Mm-hmm.
a legacy of digital output that people can consume. And if people listen to it and like it, then that's just fab. And if they
Mm-hmm.
don't, I've had a really great time doing it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then everybody wins.
Building and strengthening relationships along the way.
Yeah, with people who, because we're all so busy, maybe we don't have the time for those kind of chats. But if every 4 to 6 weeks you and I sit down for an hour and have a good old
Mm-hmm.
chinwag, and it happens to end up as output as well, that's great. But it's a perfect excuse to then have those conversations.
Yeah.
I love it. Thanks for asking me the question. That's like when I threw your question back at you last time in the middle of our. You got me. You
Yeah,
sucked me straight in.
it's like the classic. Oh, such a classic coaching move.
It was like you just sort of 1-2'd me there, like dragged me into the center of the ring, like
Yeah.
right hook, left hook, straight combination, down on the floor. Brilliant, Michael. I think we've come full circle there in a really interesting chat. Loved it, and I sense we'll have time before we break for Christmas. And we get involved in that to sit down and do another one. We'll come back for episode 3 of Michael and Brad talk, their style of talk, whatever that may be. And in the meantime, if you can come up with some SmackDown session alternative,
I think let that marathon thing just do its magic, and I'm sure something will
ruminate for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
Brilliant.
The seed's being planted. Let it grow.
Michael, enjoy the rest of your day. You've got less time left in it than I have. My day's about to start. I look forward to catching up with you very, very soon.
Thank you, Brad.
Oh, you're welcome. See you later.
Bye-bye.